Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report, your daily source of Black news, Black views, and Black opinions. Today is Monday, it's the first day of the week, April 18th, and I'm Mimi Brown.
I'm Romeo.
I'm Kay Simone.
I'm Demi Lobo, and on today's report, the high cost of calls behind bars disproportionately harms Black people, and a new bill to regulate the cost is making its way through Congress. Meanwhile, a South Carolina man on death row is choosing to be executed by firing squad over the electric chair, making him the fourth prisoner in the United States to die by the method since 1976. Then, hundreds of protesters continue to take to the streets of Grand Rapids, Michigan, demanding the police officer responsible for killing an unarmed Black man be charged.
Plus, one rapper made a surprise performance at the same gig he was fired from over the weekend. We'll tell you who that is. And Ari Lennox says Black Twitter has been calling her ugly for years, but how does it make the R&B singer really feel?
We have all that and much more. This is our voice and our truth, so let's get it.
If you've ever had to communicate with a loved one from behind bars, you know how expensive it can be. And now a bill to regulate the cost of those calls is making its way through Congress. The bill has cleared the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee with bipartisan support. This marks the furthest any legislation of this kind has gotten in the Senate. If signed into law, it would give the commission the authority to regulate calls for inmates. The high cost of calls, as you may know, disproportionately harms Black people who are incarcerated in state prisons nearly 5 times the rate of white people. Congressman Bobby Rush has introduced bills to address the high cost of prison phone calls 9 times since 2005. He's not been able to get anything signed into law. He says there's an organized resistance from sheriffs and local law enforcement groups that reap enormous profit from their allowance of these phone companies. You know what? Prison phone calls generate $1.4 billion in revenue alone. I mean, that is crazy. That just thinking about it, to pick up the phone, to call a loved one in prison, you are generating $1.4 billion for the prison system. And when you really put it into context, think about the pandemic we just went through. That was your only line of communication to your family member, right? So if that's all you could do to pick up the phone, you had no choice but to pay that amount so that you can speak to your family member. And now they're profiting off of this. So I really think that this is going to be huge for Black people because, like I just said, we are 5 times disproportionately affected by being in prison than white people are. So this is going to, do wonders for us. I mean, people are going broke to stay in touch with their loved ones at this point.
Absolutely, Mimi. So what's happening here is that sometimes it costs for a 15-minute phone call can cost up to $200. And so imagine having something pressing to talk about. You talked about the pandemic. You have family members, grandparents that could be in the hospital. You would need to talk to somebody sometimes for more than 15 minutes. And so thinking about one call costing you $200 is a lot. Also, there are some families that are grappling, trying to figure out, do I pay my own bills or do I want to talk to my family member? And that is something that we shouldn't have to decide this or that for.
I agree 100%. And there are some situations where you're just not allowed to go see your loved ones, right? You can't get to them where they're at. So you want to rely on the phone lines. But like when we talk about this story, as we mentioned before, Martha Wright Reed, the one who struggled to pay. That's where this all stems from. It stems from her. And it's a life story. We're talking about a Black woman that probably put all the money she can to keep her loved one out of jail and paid those lawyer fees. Now she just doesn't have the money to communicate. That is a problem. How do we fix this? How can we help those that will eventually be back into society? We want to make sure they're connected to us, and this is the way to do it.
Absolutely. I agree with you there. But also, when it comes to having the phone calls, they also have video calls as well. So how does that work? Because normally Zoom calls are absolutely free. So that I don't know if that's another way that they're going to go about those. But I do think this is a great thing.
It's a good way.
This is a really good thing. And, we have to remember that the prisons, they are profiting off of us, right? Like, we sit in prison a lot of times, with no bail. They're getting money from that, right? We're waiting for bail. They're getting just money off of our bodies. And then now they're getting money from, the phone calls. And to your point, Demi, it may take, it may cost $200 for a phone call. And inmates in there are making what, 14 cents an hour? So it's on the loved one to be able to continue to keep up with these calls and continue, and the burden is on, you know, us out here who want to see our loved ones. And so
I want to add real quick,
yeah, go
I
ahead.
didn't mean to interrupt, but like phone calls or maybe even putting money on their books, right? Think about that.
Not
too.
to mention, you guys, just that this doesn't affect people until it affects you. So when it seems like you don't know someone who's in jail or you've never been in jail yourself, it seems like, okay, whatever. But when you have a family member that you're trying to reach,
Hits
a
home.
close family member, absolutely, Romy, it definitely hits home for you. So the White House is unveiling a huge government-wide action plan they hope will advance racial equity across 90 federal agencies. Dozens of federal agencies will start fulfilling an executive order that's been signed by President Biden on his first day in office. Now, to advance racial equity across the entire federal government. Now, since then, each federal agency has released an action plan to close gaps in services that are currently available for so-called underserved communities. President Biden says this will not be a one-year commitment, but one that will last for generations. Susan Rice, former National Security Advisor in the Obama administration, is heading this initiative, and she is the director of the White House Domestic Policy Council.
Congressional Democrats are working on a plan to extend Medicaid to cover midwife care. House and Senate Democrats introduced legislation Friday that would improve the state of maternal care in the United States. The Mama's First Act would amend a Social Security Act that currently covers 40% of all births. Only a few state Medicaid programs cover at-home births, where midwives and doulas are often used. Black women are more than twice as likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women. The U.S. has the highest maternal mortality rate in the developed world.
Key members of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council says Biden isn't doing enough to make good on his promises that 40% of all benefits from climate investments go to disenfranchised communities. Speaking at press briefings ahead of the HBCU Climate Change Conference in New Orleans, council members say that secured $14 million from the Bezos Earth Fund called Engage, Enlighten, and Empower to hold the Biden administrations accountable for carrying out its Justice 40 initiative. President Biden made the commitment in sweeping executive order on his first day in the office. The initiative has been held up as an unprecedented push to bring environmental justice to communities plagued by pollution and climate inaction.
And new legal challenges may face the Department of Justice as it begins its focus on the Stop the Steal rally that preceded the attack on the Capitol building. Justice Department prosecutors who have been going after the people who invaded the Capitol, well, they're now turning their attention to who organized the rally under then President Trump's lead. Legal analysts say prosecutors must distinguish between what is protected by the First Amendment and what is a criminal effort were used to prevent Congress from certifying Biden's election win. Experts say it's part of the DOJ's bottom-up approach in its scrutiny of the January 6th insurrection.
And in international news, the Biden administration is extending its temporary protective status to foreign nations in the United States from Cameroon. That means that 40,000 Cameroonians who escaped their war-torn country and made it to the country will be allowed to stay here for 18 months without fear of being deported. Cameroon is in the midst of a 5-year civil war. Now, most of the Cameroon nationals, they live in the Washington, D.C. metro area. Immigration advocates and members of the Congressional Black Caucus, they've been putting pressure on the White House to relax deportations of people coming from war-torn countries. This comes after the Biden administration said it would allow 30,000 Ukrainian refugees to remain here free.
A South Carolina man on death row is choosing to be executed by a firing squad. The bizarre choice was given to Richard B. Moore, who was convicted of killing a store clerk back in 1999. Moore had the choice between being killed by a firing squad or the electric chair. Utah is the only state in the union to use firing squad as a method of execution. Moore was given a choice because the state could not find lethal injection drugs that most states have used to kill prisoners. He says he picked the firing squad but still believes the method is unconstitutional. We talked about this story last week, and if you think about this, here's a man that already has to deal with his life at some point is going to come to an end. he does have a choice. But if you think about it, choosing a firing squad over the other one because you don't want any mishaps in your last moments, your last minutes, your last seconds here on this earth. But I mean, I don't know how I really feel about this. You know, we still kind of like feel a certain way. A firing squad? How does those men that's pulling the trigger, how are they going to feel going home?
Yeah.
You know, Romeo, I think that he's trying to make a statement. He feels like these death methods are unconstitutional. So I believe that this was him making a statement and bringing awareness. He's only the fourth prisoner to have this since 1976. So he's trying to make a statement right now that this is unconstitutional. But just to let you know, the firing squad, this is not a cheap process. It's $53,000 to get executed by a firing squad, which is also money too. I mean, like you talk coming back to the government, but really, really quick, someone on Instagram, a lot of people have been weighing in on how they would like to die if it was their option. And a lot of people are saying that they would prefer a firing squad over other because it's instant, it's done, and like, you know, lethal injection is long and you have to sit there and wait to die. Exactly.
Well, yeah, they said
that was interesting.
you're right, Damien. They said it would go very, very quick, but it's just hard to believe in 2022 those are your options, right? I feel like I am in like 1909 where we're talking about firing squads and even the electric chair. You know what I mean? Like, we haven't seen that in so long now because of lethal injection. So, you know, it's a very, I don't know, I don't want to say inhumane way to die. I mean, your options there, like, what do you choose? You know, that's a hard one to have. Those are hard choices. So, I don't know.
Absolutely, because I had no clue that was even an option, just to go off of. I had no clue that was an option. So I think either way, I mean, what can you choose and how do you choose, you know?
I mean, well, you shouldn't have to choose. A lot of advocates are fighting for the death penalty to be abolished in total so that you won't have to make a decision like this. How do I want to die? Who really wants to have to make that decision for yourself?
And again, real quick, what if you have officers that say, I refuse to pull the trigger? Like, again, how do they live with this situation?
You know, Romeo, that's a good point. More people should maybe say, I don't want this job.
Absolutely. A historically black town in Tennessee is being taken over by a state comptroller's office. Jason Mumpower, the Republican comptroller, says that he will oversee the Masons Tennessee's budget because it has been poorly managed. A state judge is allowing the move after Mason city officials filed a lawsuit blocking the Mumpower from controlling all spending in the city. The city's Vice Mayor, Virginia Rivers, who is African American, says what the comptroller, is doing is, quote, akin to a hostile takeover. The comptroller's office says the takeover stems from 20 years of poor financial management, but Mason officials says the real person for the takeover is proposed Ford electric car plant scheduled to open in 3 years. The plan is expected to generate 26,000 new jobs in the area. The NAACP alleges the comptroller's office is exceeding his authority and racially discriminated against the town and its financial dealings.
And a federal judge has ruled Georgia's only Democratic candidate, Stacey Abrams, cannot immediately begin raising and spending unlimited campaign contributions under a new state law. That's because she's not yet the official nominee for her party. Abrams and the One Georgia Committee filed a lawsuit last month challenging the constitutionality of the new law. The law allows for the governor, lieutenant governor, and party nominees to raise unlimited cash for political campaigns. The lawsuit also notes that the new law allows Abrams' opponent, Republican Governor Brian Kemp, to raise unlimited funds while she is constrained by the contribution limits. Kemp defeated Abrams back in 2018 by little more than 50,000 votes. Georgia's primary election is set for May 24th.
Staying in Georgia for a bit here, Atlanta Police Chief Rodney Scott is calling it quits this summer. Rodney, Brian, who has been with the force since 1988, he says that he will step down in June. It's at a time when the city has been plagued by crime and violence. Mayor Andre Dickens, he says the city will conduct a nationwide search to replace Bryant. Atlanta has had 51 homicides this year, and that's up 39% from last year.
Hundreds of protesters continue to take to the streets of Grand Rapids, Michigan after the police killing of an unarmed black man earlier this month. Demonstrators marched around the city for a 5-hour rally Saturday. The family of Patrick Loyola are demanding the officer who killed the Congolese immigrant be charged for the killing. Grand Rapids police released footage of the shooting last week. Investigators say cops pulled Loyola over because the license plates on the car did not match the make and model of the car. Police dash cam video shows Loyola run away from the officer. Now, Loyola was facing the ground on his hands and knees when the officer shot him in the head. Mistakenly, I saw this video. I did not want to see it, but I did. And I talked to a friend of mine back in the Midwest who's a police officer because, he watches the show and he's like, well, sometimes, I feel like we get a bad rap in this situation. I said, well, not every cop is a bad cop, but you are trained to do jobs a certain way. So break this down. What would you have done in this situation? He would have attempted to tase him, but if he felt like he'd taken the taser away from him, he would have made a distance between him and the guy and maybe then pulled his arm out, but not necessarily fired. Because from what I'm seeing here, this police officer was there by himself, so he didn't have help. So now I think about, okay, if you're trained to do things this way, how come everyone doesn't follow suit? This man died for no reason. I'll tell you this happens a lot. Officers are trained to handle this situation, but this man should not have died for just simply being pulled over because of the license plate.
Again, Romeo, Mimi and I were sitting in the office with you when you watched the video, and it made me not want to watch it. I know I was kind of like, well, if it shook Romeo that much, I know I don't want to watch it. But Reverend Al Sharpton, he tweeted yesterday that he's going to do the eulogy at Patrick's funeral. He's also going to cover the burial expenses through his nonprofit. But one conversation that's happening online right now is that, and Mimi, this goes back to a story we were talking about mugshots being shown. Someone said that, isn't it interesting how they protect the identities of police officers, because the police chief announced that he wasn't going to release the police officers' name initially. Isn't it interesting how they protect the identities of police officers who murder us in broad daylight, but blast everyone else's mugshot all across the media? And so it's kind of like, it's interesting where we choose and pick when we want to release the identity of a person online.
This is sad. I watched the press conference between the family and I think he was sitting next to Attorney Ben Crump. And, they were translating for the parents because they don't even speak English. But what I could feel the pain. It doesn't matter whether you speak English or not. I could feel the pain. And the pain was, listen, we brought our family to America to escape violence. And our son was killed by the police. You know what I mean? Like, when you gather your family and you're thinking you're going somewhere and you're starting a new life, you never imagine that your 20-something-year-old son is going to be taken in the manner in which he was taken. And so to see their pain, like, it doesn't matter whether you're African, African-American, whatever, you can feel it. And I felt it. And it is absolutely sad. And he had 2 kids, you know what I mean? And so it's like, I just can't imagine, everyone online you're not supposed to run. You cannot tell anybody what they're supposed to do in that situation. It doesn't matter.
Because you don't know what
you don't know. He could have been scared out of his mind. He didn't know what was going to happen. And so he ran, but that doesn't give the cop the authority to be the judge, the trial, and the jury. You know what I mean? So my heart just goes out every time I see this video, and I can't imagine watching it. Romeo, I know you saw it, and your face alone was enough for me.
Yeah.
I have to piggyback off of Romeo here because I watched the video, but the thing was I couldn't even get through it. After I saw the police officer on his back and then the headline said execution style, pretty much it was like I can't watch this. And to just think about why and how traffic stops even get to a point where somebody is outside of their vehicle fighting for their life at this point.
Yeah.
Why?
No,
you know?
You're right. Look, and it happens to people of color a lot. And I'm just going to say this. We've seen videos where they're having white people encounter with police, and they scream at them, they threaten them, they swing things at them, and they still manage to go home.
Absolutely. A Wisconsin government group is asking the state legislature to give almost $1 million to a Milwaukee man who spent 24 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. Last week, the board claims awarded Daryl Dwayne Holloway $25,000 and another $100,000 in attorney fees. The board wants the legislature to approve an additional $975,000 to Holloway. Holloway was convicted in 2 1993 home invasions, sexual assaults. He was also convicted even though there were no physical evidence linking him to the crime. DNA testing was not conducted at either crime scene at the time. Years later, the Innocent Project tested the DNA from one of the assaults. It proven Holloway did not commit the crime at all.
The fact that he was in jail for this long and they're giving him $25,000 is outrageous.
Right.
So hopefully they will approve the $1 million and he can get what he deserves.
Yeah, I mean, you can't get those years back. You just
Absolutely.
can't.
Do you think $1 million is enough?
It's never enough. When you lose your life, it's never enough. But it's a start at least.
Absolutely.
$25,000 is not enough.
Yeah, what is that? What is that going to do? How's that going to allow you to get back on your feet and get back into society and live right? Are you going to be a burden on your friends and family because you only have $25,000? But if you have that kind of money, it can get you started in the right direction and hopefully change you for the better, so you don't have to go back in. Here's a man wrongfully accused, right?
Yeah.
Shouldn't have been there. So what are we talking about?
Absolutely. You know, $25,000, like you said, Mimi, is a disgrace. It is shameful. It is disrespectful. It is an insult. This man was released from jail at age 48, so he lost I forgot the exact word that they called it, but the years where you can make the majority of your money. Yes, you can start a business at 50 and rechange your life, but you make those money moves, those power plays, and build your career in, you know, your 20s, your 30s. And so for him to be released at 48, $25,000 is definitely a slap in the face.
Slap in the face, for sure. New York City Mayor Eric Adams is asking, where are the thousands of Black Lives Matter protesters when black people are victims of common gun violence? Adams was speaking about the arrest of Frank James, who was accused of carrying out a shooting on the Brooklyn subway car last week. He went on to say, I thought Black lives mattered. The victims were black. Adams has made crime the signature issue of both his campaign and administration. Since winning the general election last year, Adams has clashed with BLM over policing issues. You know, just when I want to like him, he reminds me of why I cannot like him, because the two have nothing to do with the other. Let's remember that Black Lives Matter, it was formed so that we can hold officers accountable in all the stories we just mentioned, in the Patrick Loyola case, in, you know, the Milwaukee guy, the case we just spoke about. You know, the officers need to be held accountable when they do things. White vigilantes need to be held accountable when they come after us, right? I hate when people talk about black on black crime, because if we do something to each other, we go to jail. That's the whole point of it, right? This guy, the subway shooter, he's in jail now. So you cannot compare the two. They just don't go together.
Okay, can I say something?
Please.
I'm going against the grain here, okay? I'm hoping soulmates that someone could feel me, because I'm going against the grain, might get dragged, you know, I'm going to go for it. So part of what Eric Adams says, there is some validity to it, because honestly, let's think about it. When I saw that the shooter in New York was black, I was like, dang. I was like, man, you know what I mean? You don't want it to be our people. And we don't talk about, I'm just being honest here, because yes, you're right, we should not compare, but we don't really talk about it as much, black on black crime, because that's our people. And we don't want to make us look, we don't want to make us look bad. And so part of what Eric Adams is saying is kind of true. We don't want to be hypocrites, because Black Lives Matter does care more about what black people dying at the hands of white people than black people dying at the hands of black people. But not that it's right. I'm just saying that there is some validity to what he's saying.
But no, I don't think there's any validity to what he's saying, because at the end of the day, black people have been dying, we've been hung, we've been, you know, hosed down forever, right? So if you have a group, you have an organization that's saying, hey, we're going to stick up for black people, because we never get justice in those cases, you know, and we don't talk about white on white crime, we don't talk about Asian on Asian crime, but we are quick to point out black on black crime. And I just don't think that's fair, you know, because we do not get a chance to, when it's us, we are going to jail. So there's no such thing, you know, and for Black Lives Matter to come out and say, oh my gosh, the shooter was black, that's, if you read and if you understand, if you follow the history of what they're trying to do, they're just trying to make sure that we are not forgot about, you know, like Ahmaud Arbery or George Floyd, like we are just not forgot, we are not forgot about. I think that's what it is.
About the way that you think about the way that these people were slaughtered or were shot in New York, you cannot justify the fact race shouldn't matter here. I mean, this was terrible the way that he did. So like, it
is absolutely wrong what he did, and he should go to jail for that. That is absolutely wrong. I just don't see how bringing Black Lives Matter into it will change anything.
You want to speak on it real quick, Kay?
Well, no, I was trying to back off of what Demi was saying too, because we're always talking about, you know, you have Black Lives Matter that's here, that is standing up for us and our injustices against other ethnicities, police, whomever, right? But at some point, we do have to make the conversation about black on black. We have to. Because we can't tell another environment or another community, hey, you can't touch us, you know? Right. But then we're not standing up for ourselves to say, you know, we can't touch each other.
I guarantee you, if it was a white person, I guarantee if a white person would have said what they said about black people, we would have been up in arms about it. But because Eric Adams is black, we're giving him a pass. And so
are we giving him a pass, though? I don't know if we're giving him a pass.
I think
you think people giving him a pass? I mean, listen, is there crime in our communities? Does it need to be addressed? Absolutely. But I still believe that has nothing to do with BLM, because when you read the newspapers, when you watch the news, they are always trying to make it seem like we are killing each other at rates that white people aren't killing each other at. You know, it's just more sensationalized than every race is killing everybody, but you only hear about black on black crime. That's how I feel.
A topic
I know
we can
yeah,
exactly.
we could go all day on. We do have to move on.
We can do a whole show
Yes,
on this.
yes.
All right, let's move on.
Yes, let's blow some steam here. Our next story: a former Miami police officer could spend up to 5 years in prison for assaulting a black woman who he called for help. The jury found Alejandro Giraldo guilty of felony battery and official misconduct in the 2019 arrest of Dima Loving. Loving called cops to report her neighbor had pointed a shotgun at her. Giraldo's lawyer told the jury his client didn't do anything wrong, but, quote, maybe his bedside manner was off. The arrest sparked outrage in a county where officers from 4 different police agencies were awaiting trial on allegations they battered suspects while on duty.
A political donor who had 2 black men die in his home after drug overdoses will spend the next 30 years of his life in prison. That's right. Ed Buck was found guilty last year of 9 charges connected to methamphetamine distribution resulting in death. Federal prosecutors say Buck, who had a fetish for black men, led them to his apartment in West Hollywood, the section of Los Angeles. Once there, injected the men with meth. Now, Buck was a fundraiser for the Democratic National Party in the past. Now, the victims of Jamel Moore and Timothy Dean died 18 months apart in what prosecutors call drug-fueled sex parties.
And the family of a Sacramento, California woman is calling for justice after police dash cam video shows officers firing 30 shots in her car and killing her. Tracy Gaeta died after a Stockton K-9 officer fired into her car back in February. The dash cam video shows Gaeta's car reverse into the squad car. The officers fire, then reloads his weapon, then fires again into the car multiple times. Her family says Gaeta may have had a mental breakdown. During the incident, they say the cops used excessive force in firing their weapons. Investigators say the incident started after Gaeta hit an officer with her car and then drove away. The officer involved in the shooting is back on the job after just 3 days on administrative leave. Stockton police say the case is under investigation. This is really unfortunate. You know, honestly, it gets kind of taxing, you know, with these sort of stories, but you know, I just want to humanize her. She was a grandmother, she was a mother to, you know, of 2 kids, and if she was having a mental breakdown, then I just think we need to be, you know, police need to be more sensitive to what that may be. And gunning her down, reloading, then gunning her down again is not the answer.
No,
they fired 18 shots just straight into the car.
What kind of day are you having as an officer, right? No, she backed into the car. You could have easily handled that differently. We always talk about that. You have so many options. You're trained to have different options, yet you choose just to fire into a car not knowing if there's kids inside the car, what's going on in that situation, but then you reload. That just says a lot. And for him to be put back onto the force already, it's making me feel like you're telling him that's okay, and that's not okay.